Super, right, okay, that's us. Well, welcome to Building Boundaries. So if you have been on one of these before, then you know my style is really informal. It's more of a chinwag, really. Just an hour for us to press pause and actually reflect and get curious. That's what I'm all about. Just encouraging people to get curious about the things that really matter in our lives. And happiness is the core, but happiness is like a wee diamond, isn't it? It's got lots of different facets to it. And boundaries is one of them. So a lot of the chat about boundaries is preventing our energy being drained, but also there's a great big dose of the art of allowing in here, because a lot of the time we can stop ourselves experiencing good stuff. So what I would really love for you guys to get from this time is just a little bit of clarity around your own boundaries, just a deeper understanding as to what they are, and to get curious on the different types of boundaries you have in the different aspects of your life, and what you can do about it if they're not supporting you. Because all of us at some point, it might be that you're absolutely rocking and rolling in all of the different aspects of your life right now, but we're human. And the nature of being human is it's a gorgeous roller coaster, isn't it? That there's some moments that everything, just the stars align and everything's working magically, and then something happens and we shift out of that alignment. So even if you are rocking and rolling right now, I would love you to just get curious around the different kind of aspects of this. So when you do find yourself kind of slipping out of alignment, that is a lot easier to just slip back in. So that's my plan for this evening. What would you guys like to get out of it? Because I appreciate this is your time that you're investing in this. So for this to be a good hour of your time, what do you guys want to achieve? Anybody go? You can either put it in the chat box or just say it out loud.
I think sometimes when you think of putting boundaries up, you can then think you're being a bit selfish. And I think that's my problem. So I would like to know how to overcome that, to know the difference.
Okay. So for you, boundaries equals selfishness in some way?
It can do, especially with family.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for sharing that. So strategies for overcoming that kind of feeling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or just clarity in it, what can I do about that?
Yep.
Cool. What else? What kind of got you curious enough to come along this evening?
I think for me, I've kind of realised just with the virus that my boundaries aren't as good as I thought they were. And probably quite similar to yourself, Lynn, I feel guilty if I say no, or I tend to just think, okay, I can do it, or I can squeeze it in, and I think I hugely overestimate my abilities and my time and everything, and then just realise how tired and how done I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And you are not alone there. Absolutely not alone there. And Sebastian is saying strategies, how to set boundaries at work. So that's a specific thing at work. So that's great. Thank you very much for sharing that. Cool. Anybody else would like to share anything? Are you quite happy to go along for the ride? And as I say, we're informal, so you just ask questions as we go. Cool. Super duper. So just so you know, a wee bit of a change from before, I'm recording this, and so some of the people who can't attend this, then I can send that out to them. But don't worry, you guys aren't going to be in it, because Zoom has got a setting where it can just be my mug. So that's what they're going to get. They're not going to get you. So just so you're aware of that, so you're sharing kind of appropriately, knowing that it would be out of here, but in a fairly anonymous way. Okie dokie. So let's rock and roll. So what the heck is a boundary in the first place? For me, I'm curious what visual comes up for you guys, because some of you may very well be a visual person and others won't. So if you've got a visual, that's absolutely great. And if you don't, then just get a sense of what comes up for you, because that's really important to get a sense of, because sometimes that can be very interesting and shine a light on what our issue is. So for me, just to give you a bit of an example, years ago when I really struggled with overgiving, my boundary image was a wall, and I didn't want to have a wall around me. Whereas now it's kind of more of a marshmallow kind of ready brick kind of image that I've got up. So I wonder, when you just get a sense check of what comes up with a boundary, what does come up? Because when you're wanting to kind of change your boundary and create something and build something that's far more supportive in the different aspects of your life, then knowing what you're actually changing can be quite useful. Does anybody else have that kind of visual coming up, or that idea coming up that a boundary is quite a set thing? So this is it, and once I've built it, it's, you know, it's a non-negotiable. It's quite hard to break down and overcome. So if that is you, then as we go on through this evening, just be aware of where you started, and again, what kind of image would be more supportive for the intention that you guys have. So you've got that, and before we go on again, a really important thing when it comes to boundaries is what's the intention of them. So Sebastian, you've shared that specifically it's a work thing for you. So you're wanting strategies around that. So my invitation to you would be, well, what do you want to achieve in work? Who do you want to show up as in work? Because when we know what we're wanting to create, then it's reverse engineering that. So what are the things that I need to put in place for me to have that experience? And equally in all the different aspects of our life. So when we're thinking about our health, and we're thinking about our wealth, and we're thinking about the different pockets of relationships, our work colleagues, our family, our friends, and you know, you can even go down to the individual people, because sometimes it's just particular people we struggle with rather than a broad brush. So when you're thinking about the different aspects of your life, what is it you're wanting to create an experience? Because without that clarity, how do you know what you're wanting, what kind of boundaries you're wanting to create? And without that clarity, then it's very easy to just keep on doing the same thing over and over again. And that might be overgiving, and it might be that you've just been a little bit too rigid and not allowing the stuff that you really want to experience into your life, because you've been telling yourself that you're not really aware of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
To make others understand that it's okay to say no at times, absolutely. And to help them not take it personally. I know it's someone's problem if they take it personal, but work-wise, it will reflect on you. So, yeah, so that's a little bit twofold, isn't it? Because there's a responsibility in how we communicate, and there's also the responsibility of that other person. So it's not our responsibility whether that person takes it personally or not, as long as we're communicating that and we're confident we're communicating that in a compassionate and respectful way. So it's really important, again, that's where the curiosity comes in, isn't it? To kind of get to know your audience and who you're communicating with and what their styles are. And that's often not entirely possible in a work context, because when you're sending out an email or talking with your team or whatever, then you're not going to know the individual kind of triggers and nuances of people. So as long as we are showing up and doing what we can do with compassion and respect, there's a very minimal amount of stuff we can do in terms of that person taking it personally. Because communication, it's all about our filters, isn't it? And we don't have control over other people's filters. We've got control over how we communicate, and we've got control over our responsibility in terms of, has that message been received? Has it been heard in the way that I wanted it to be heard? And if it hasn't, then absolutely that's back to me to communicate that. And it's also not my responsibility if I've pushed a button. That's your responsibility to own that, and my responsibility to kind of hold that space for you. Does that make sense? So it's a bit of a tricky one, isn't it? Absolutely. A message that I got to bring up at the workshop for people that couldn't come along. That's what somebody was saying, was around a work context and a personal context where managing expectations. So setting the scene and saying, these are my non-negotiables, but actually just letting other things get in the way. So communication is massive. And that's the secondary bit to our boundaries. So let's fire in and see what comes up. So our boundaries, you've got that image, you've got that curiosity as to what you actually want to achieve. And then we're reverse engineering from there. And boundaries are simply just our guiders to help us stay on track, to stay in alignment, to create the thing that we want to create. That's simply all that they are. And when we have an understanding that when you show up as your best, when you stay in alignment, then that supports other people, then it's a lot easier to kind of nurture your boundaries. So I'm wondering where you guys fit with that kind of belief. Do you feel that, or do you believe that when you are your best, then that's kind of infectious and that is a positive ripple effect out into other people? Because often what I think Caroline was saying with that kind of giving and giving and giving, and Lynn, what you were saying around that feeling not so good about asserting boundaries, that often when we assert our boundaries and we get comfortable doing that, we're actually teaching other people to nurture their boundaries too.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you're at your best, you lift your colleagues up if they've been down. So I work in quite a small team, and we have one person in the team that has suffered from depression. And because of COVID, it's a really stressful time for this person. So with us trying to be in our best, we're actually almost like a little support bubble for him. So none of us can leave the house, none of us can go into the office. So you're never escaping. The commute was the way to escape stressful life, and the commute home was the way to escape stressful work situations. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
It's a really good foundation to come from, because so often when you're naturally a giver, it's quite difficult to kind of assert yourself. But when you're coming from the foundation that actually every time I assert myself and nurture what's important to me, I'm role modelling that for other people. And the more high energy that I can stay in, then the more likely it is that those other people are going to stay high energy too, or not stay high energy, kind of rise up to that level of energy. So I am going to do a wee screen share. I'm going to try a wee screen share. Let's see if this will work. So if you've got, don't do that. If you've got a wee pen and paper, then you might want to draw or write alongside me here, just to get a bit of a sense as to where you're at. Let's share. No, don't do that, don't do that. Is it coming through? Is it going to come through? I love it when it works. And I might just go old school with paper. I was doing a call earlier on and it worked fine. And then maybe a couple of hours ago, it just decided not to work. There we go. Let's not hang about. Cool. Right, so on your paper, let's go old school. If you can write out whatever style you want to, I've just done it in a bit of a table. So we've got different categories of boundaries. And this is purely to get you curious, because there's so many different sides to things and it's very easy to talk about boundaries as a general kind of thing. So if you write down the different categories, which are physical, and that, as it sounds, is to do with our body and how we use our body, so our kind of personal space and things like that. We've got our intellectual boundaries, so that is our ideas and what we're communicating. We've got our emotional boundaries. So they are the things that we feel, our energy. So is it a gain to us? Is it a drain to us? How's it impacting us? Again, that image for me comes up.
What was the last one?
Emotional. So we've got physical, intellectual, emotional. Then we've got sexual, which is a mixture of emotional and physical. And obviously that's permission-based, not just having sex, but the kind of interrelationships of that and comments and the energy that goes along there. We've got material. So that's our things. And we've got time. So all of these can impact in the different aspects of our life. And now in terms of the quality of our boundaries, so they're the kind of different aspects of it, and they show up in every kind of category of our life. And then our boundaries can be porous, or they can be rigid, or they can be healthy, or a bit of a mishmash. So porous is when they are kind of not there and you let anything in and you let anything out. You're not really clear exactly what you're looking after. So you're saying yes to a lot of things and no to not a lot. Rigid boundaries are like that brick wall. And they're rigid and they're fixed and you know exactly what your expectations are, and you're only going to let in what you want to let in, and you're not letting a heck of a lot out. And then our healthy boundaries are more flexible. So it's got a bit of a give and take. So they're flexible enough for us to receive unexpected things, unexpected good things, and they're firm enough to bounce back the things that don't support us. So if you think of this in terms of passive, aggressive, and assertive, not that having rigid boundaries means that you're aggressive by any manner of means, but it's that kind of energy. So when you've got healthy boundaries, you've got a degree of assertion there. And when you've got porous boundaries, there's a degree of passivity. But when you think about the different aspects of your life, for your health, your wealth, your work, the different relationships that you have, your hobbies, the things that you do for fun, your own personal growth and well-being, those kind of aspects. When you look at that, have a wee think where you feel that your boundaries are. So are there particular examples? And I'm not asking you to share them, but particular people that perhaps you've got more porous boundaries with, or maybe really rigid boundaries. Yeah. And most people do find, certainly in my experience anyway, that they are all over the place, and that in one context it's this, and in another context it's another thing. And the wonderful thing about that is it means that when you've got healthy boundaries in one aspect, you already know how to do it. So there's one aspect of your life at least that's working really well, that you've managed to create those boundaries that actually are flexible and nurturing what you want to create. And if you can do it in one context, you can do it in another. So the foundation piece is there. I'll give you another wee moment to fill that in. And if you raise your hand or nip into the chat room, just let me know when you're done. Cool. Super. Got you all done? Magic. Super, super duper. So with that is such a useful base from which you can jump. So when you're a mix of them, you have got the gold within. So has anybody here not got a mix? Have we all got a bit of a mix? Okay, so I would like you to think about what's working well in your life. So the aspect, at least one aspect, that's working well, where you have managed to create healthy boundaries. So what is it that's going on there? What are you believing to be true? What are you believing to be easy?
I would say that I've got healthy boundaries with my son, who lives with me. Sometimes, and I think it was because I was a teacher, I can come across as quite assertive or overly assertive when I don't even mean to.
Yeah.
But because my son knows me really well, he knows that I'm coming from a good place.
Yeah.
So I feel that the boundaries are quite relaxed with him, but he also knows when he's going too far in any particular way.
Yeah.
And I can just say calmly to him, no, that's not okay. Doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
But I can be myself. I think that's the thing.
Yeah. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would anybody else like to share what's working, what's the gold and what's working well for them? So now have a wee look at if you've got another aspect of your life that's working well, then look there and see if there's anything else to find. And I want you to just go through the different aspects where you feel that you've got healthy boundaries. And just tap into that. What are you believing to be true? What's the difference that makes a difference? What makes it easy to nurture your boundaries? Notice the clarity that you've got in terms of your intention in that aspect of your life. What are you wanting to achieve there? What are you wanting to create? And once you're ready there, then let's go to the dark place. Let's go to the aspects of life that you feel aren't working so well and your boundaries aren't that healthy, whether they're porous or rigid. Just tap into your awareness there and notice what's different between when you've got boundaries that work well and when they're not as supportive. And it could be things like, I don't feel it's safe to be me, or I don't feel seen as me. Because things are easy when we're seen as ourselves, aren't they? So the opposite of ease, what's challenging about that? What makes us feel more difficult to nurture your boundaries here? Notice your clarity of your intention. What is it you're really wanting to create and experience?
I think maybe you need to show a bit more vulnerability in certain places or situations if you are going to show your boundaries, because you don't really know how somebody else is going to react.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when it comes to a healthy boundary, remember it is that kind of flexible one that protects you, and it also kind of bats the bad stuff back. So often when we go from a rigid boundary that protects us and it doesn't let much in or out, then it can feel, it's like that assertive aggression kind of pendulum, that often when we've been really passive, we'll go to aggression and then we'll kind of settle in the middle at assertive. So it can feel sometimes when we've gone from rigid, we'll go to porous and then we'll settle in the middle because we've kind of learned, we've kind of touched base on each of them, and then we'll come back in the middle with healthy. And equally, if we've been overgiving and kind of just not really had any boundaries with porous, we can feel that the opposite, what we need to do is build something really rigid when we don't. But it might be that you just go there, because if you imagine just dropping the pendulum, it doesn't automatically kind of rest at the magic point. It goes, whoa, first of all, before settling back in.
How do you get to that point? You're in the middle.
In the middle, nature takes its course. You don't have to do anything with the pendulum, do you? You drop it and you let it, and it just naturally does that. There's a lot less to life than we make out when we're really clear in our intention. So when you really, really know what you're wanting to create and what your intention is with that specific aspect, then that's you. You've set the intention, so you've dropped that. And when we take communication being the message that's received, back to what we were talking about earlier on, you're going to keep communicating with those people until they've received the message that you want them to receive, if that makes sense. So you've dropped it, and you might boo-boo, and you might be a bit too aggressive, and you might be like, no, I'm not letting anything in. And then you're like, right, okay, that didn't work very well. So you take a couple of bricks away and you try again. And then it comes back and you notice that that didn't work very well, but it worked a bit better than the last time. And then you try again, and bit by bit. And then, like I said at the beginning, then life happens and there's a wee earthquake or something, and then it wobbles again and we're back. But as long as we slow down enough times to kind of pause and reflect as to what's working well and what's not, then, and we adapt our behaviour accordingly, then you naturally fall into alignment, because that's your natural place to be. Because it feels good, doesn't it? It feels good when things are working well. It feels good when things are easy. It's just trusting yourself. Does that resonate?
Is it a bit about communicating what you need as well?
Absolutely.
You learn that, but you're learning that as you're going. Yeah. I'm just thinking of a situation that happened with my wee girls, where I chose to tell them that I was stressing out about something that I was going to take part in. And because I'd done that, they were actually very kind and supportive and done lovely things. Whereas before, with my boundaries, I would have been running rings around myself trying to make sure that I'd done all these different things for them, instead of actually saying to them, well, I need your help today with a couple of things. And it just totally changed everything.
Yeah. And now that you've got that convincer that actually that works. So rather than me bottling everything up and feeling that I've got to be in control of everything, that you just
because I can't.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So that's you you've taken that little step. So you're kind of more.
You're doing the.
You're
finding your place.
Aye.
And alignment. So when you're trial and error, you're finding your place for what works for you, and that's where you're finding your alignment.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely. There's not one, if you do this strategy, then everything will be wonderful. Every single one of us is unique. Every single situation each of us go into is going to be unique in terms of the timing, the energy that you've got in that moment, the energy that other people have got in that moment. So it really is about slowing down and trusting. Is what I'm doing working? Is it supporting me? Create the thing that I want to create and experience that, which could be as simple as I don't want to be doing it all myself. I want to feel that I'm part of something. I want to feel ease. So yes, Marty, it is like the law of cause and effect, and it's totally doing our very, very best to hang about in cause. Is everybody familiar with cause and effect? So cause and effect is when, back to the pendulum. So the pendulum, I drop it, so it causes me to swing, and the effect is over here. So the effect is a swing, but it's me that's dropping it. So that's cause. So we can either hang out in our excuses and our reasons as to why things aren't happening, which is the effect, or we can hang out in the results, which is I've got my intention, I know exactly what I'm wanting to create, I know exactly what I need to do, maybe not exactly. I'm a big believer in a fuzzy goal, but you've got a direction of travel. You know what you want, roughly. And that's your non-negotiable. So that's you, you've got your alignment there. So when you get the result, which can be a wee bit skew with and off track and unexpected, when somebody takes something personally and you didn't expect that, then that's just learning. Right, okay, I wonder what happened there. And with compassion and respect, that curiosity, what could I have done better there? And coming back to cause, because you're the one that's causing the communication, you're the one that's causing the ripple. So you can kind of direct the kind of intensity of that ripple or the pattern of that ripple. Does that make sense? Super. So you've got a sense of what boundaries are in terms of the different aspects of your life and whether you've got healthy ones and not so healthy ones, whether rigid or porous. So you've got that, but now what the heck can we do about them? So I hope you've got a bit of a sense. But first of all, what's really useful is to notice what comes up for you. So you've already got the models of how you can create healthy boundaries and the aspects that work for you. So let's look at the ones that aren't so much. And what comes up for you? Are you clear? So we've done this already, but are you clear on what your intention is? What you want to create there?
Mm-hmm.
So in these work contexts, it's not just what and not just work, but it's not just what you want to create, it's how you want to be and how you want to show up. So when you think about how you want to use your time in all the different aspects, when you think about your relationships, when you think about all those other aspects, how you want your ideas to be treated or received, how you want people to respect your physical space, etc. Do you know what you want? And it's absolutely okay if you don't know. And if you notice that you don't know, then also know that the people around you probably won't know either. And that's where conflict can happen. So much like that, the pendulum coming and going and it just naturally settling, it can feel a bit chaotic to begin with. And we don't know we've had a boundary breach sometimes until it's been breached. And it's like, whoa, I know that wasn't okay. That was not okay. And I did not know that that wasn't okay until it happened. But then with that awareness, we can do something about it. A tip on taking things personally, I watched a TEDx recently, which was about a guy who was trying to make himself not take things personally. The main idea is he became a referee. So just think about a referee. Any choice or any interpretation he would make, he will still be shouted at and criticised. We are only responsible for what and how we communicate, not in what others are understanding. Although, just to oomph that up a little bit, kind of back to what we were saying before, in terms of that cause and effect, when we really want a message to be heard, then it's important to be curious about how that message is being received, rather than the default of, well, I told you, I did tell you, told you in an email, I've told you in person, I've told you, family or professionally. We've all had that, like, for God's sake, how many times do I need to tell you? Well, actually, we've just said it. If we go back into cause rather than effect, if I want you to hear that message, then it's important for me to be flexible in my communication to the degree that you do actually hear it. Whereas I think sometimes it's very easy to just fall into the, I've told you, I've said it, and it's not my responsibility for what you've heard. On some levels, yes. Depends on the communication. So you've got clear on whether or not you're clear, and you've got an intention, you've got clarity in what you want to create there. What comes up for you when you think of the boundaries that you want to nurture, how you want to be? At the very beginning of the session, there was guilt that was brought up. Is there anything else that comes up? What will happen if, all of a sudden you start saying no, or you start saying yes, or you start behaving in a different way? No worries, no worries.
Sorry, I was a bit slow to jump in, but I notice I've tried to work on my boundaries because I recognise I need to, but because I'm working differently at work, it's hard for people to accept. So I find I'm more able to set a boundary, but it isn't always respected.
Yeah.
And because of the nature of the job I do, and it's a bit of a grey area anyway, and particular people feel that their ideas trump my thoughts about what my role is.
Yeah.
And so I find that, I suppose that's probably mirrored in terms of work and personal relationships, because I've recently tried to be much clearer and set clear boundaries. But there's definitely quite it's not always easy. Yeah.
And what I would love to share with you there is, in that tension, there's always tension before something's accepted. So it's very easy to feel that tension and think this isn't working. And only you'll know if you're really kind of stepping into the thing that how you really want to show up. So that clarity of your role and who you want to be within that, and all the other aspects that you're creating. And if you're really sure that what you're doing is nurturing those boundaries, it's not a magic pill, unfortunately.
Yeah, so that's what I'm finding. And as well, it's about sitting in that discomfort, whereas my natural tendency is, okay, I'll just do it this once.
Yep.
Which is disastrous.
Yep. And that is wonderful awareness there. And when you think back to that pendulum swinging, that sometimes, the natural way is for it to just go over here before here. And that is managing people's expectations. And that in itself has got a massive ripple effect of people being in shock that, why is she not doing that? Why is he not doing that? Or why all of a sudden are they doing that? when they didn't do that before. So it is, if you're sure what you're doing is the right thing for you to stay in alignment, then it's finding a way to maintain your energy to stay in that tension while you're creating that new expectation. And that's an energy drainer, living in the tension, for sure. Really, really challenging. So what can you do to keep your energy going? To refuel. Well, yeah, that can help. That can help. But honestly, it's so important to include self-care when we're creating new boundaries, because living in that tension is tough. Because people have got used to you showing up in a particular way, and now you're changing that, which is changing their world. And they were comfortable in their world, so they're uncomfortable now, and they're like, I don't know what's happening, I'm just going back to my default. So you're uncomfortable, they're uncomfortable, and you just need to persist until that's the new normal, which is really tough when all of us are getting used to a number of new normals all at once. So how do you feel in terms of that surety of what you're doing is what you need to be doing?
I'm pretty sure. I mean, the role I took on grew arms and legs and then some, and I would say it was the role of 2 full-time staff members, and I was working, a couple hours late every night. It wasn't sustainable. There was a big price to pay.
Yeah. So my invitation to you is to stay strong with that and just be in the tension for now. And just notice what you notice. Notice what you notice in terms of other people, and stay in that cause in terms of the communication. So when you're communicating something, make sure what you're communicating is being heard in the way that you intended it to be heard, rather than just telling people that you can't do this thing, or whatever it is. And equally for all of us when we're recreating our boundaries. What comes up for anybody else?
I was having a wee laugh there because I'm in a similar position to Caroline, work-wise and job-wise and whatever, but I find that the clarity bit, just being clear on why I'm trying to do what I'm trying to do and who I want to be when I show up, and the importance of what I'm trying to do kind of keeps me going a wee bit, because it can be very, very difficult and it is a huge energy drain, and then you kind of feel a bit lost and muddled, and it's good to revisit the purpose of what it's all about and why it's important. So the clarity bit's really quite key to me.
Absolutely. It's very easy to get stuck in busyness and to never, slow down, press pause, to get clear on actually what our intention is here. And when we're clear on our intention, then we've got a better idea of what needs done. And when we know what needs done, then it's a lot easier to create boundaries that support us get what we need to get done.
Yeah, because then you start to be able to see it as part of the bigger picture, instead of just, like you say, being busy every day and chasing your tail and trying to get through your never-ending to-do list. However, if you see that you have this that you need to get done, then you see the importance of then creating those boundaries to safeguard your own energy and your headspace and all the rest of it.
Absolutely. And the more that we nurture our own boundaries, the more we invite other people to nurture theirs. And And that's a really key thing, especially in our personal relationships, where we can find it naturally a little bit tougher sometimes. That it's, what do we want them to do? Do we want to facilitate that helplessness by always doing all the stuff and always being that person that we don't actually really want to be, but it's how they feel that we are. So back to the intention, what do you want to create for yourself? What do you want to create for them? What do you want them to experience? And when you're really, really clear on that, it really does help the guilt fade away, because it's not a selfish thing. In a self-centered way, I'm a believer in the difference between selfishness and self-centeredness. Selfish is good, to stay in our own lane, and that knowing that when I show up as my best self, then that's infectious and that helps everybody. So that self-care, selfishness, being self-centered and it all being about me is not a good thing. So if you've got anything particular that comes up, just note it down. So is it a guilt thing? Is it a fear thing? What will happen if? Just so you can recognise that. Because as Caroline says, when we are doing something new, it can bring up a whole lot of things, because we are going to be living in that tension for a while. And that tension can bring up a whole lot of icky thinking. And if you're aware of that icky thinking, then you can see it for what it is. Icky thinking. It's not real. It's not a reason to not do that thing. So lastly, as you look at all the different aspects of your life and what you're wanting to work on, what specifically are the things or the actions or the behaviours that are going to be most supportive to you? What do you need or want to tweak? It's going to help you move into creating healthy boundaries. And feel free to share if you would like to.
Communication for me, I think that's been a big thing for me recently. And just the wee example I gave with my girls, that was just upfront, honest communication, but it worked.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was Lynn earlier on said about being vulnerable. It's wee girls I've got who are 13 and 6, so you don't really want to be telling them that you're going to be feeling stressed or you need help or you're feeling a bit wobbly. So there was a level of vulnerability there, but it just worked. The outcome was just exactly what we all needed, because they didn't see me kind of losing my rag because I was trying to do too much. And we all just felt a wee bit more connected at the end, and that was just communication.
I think that's really good that you did that, because you're then showing your girls that it's okay to be a wee bit vulnerable and that you're not superwoman, because nobody is. Because then they would grow up thinking, oh, I need to be like my mum. She was superwoman and she could do everything. And that's not necessarily healthy either. So well done. I think that's good.
Thanks. It's important, isn't it, not to kind of have them grown up thinking that they need to be everything to everybody and do everything. You know, it's teaching them to set their own boundaries, whatever they may be.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. We talk about that it's okay to not be okay, but yet we don't model that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a wonderful bit of modelling that, having heebie-jeebies here, please help.
Mm-hmm. Aye, need to practice it.
So as we wrap up, if you would like to share in the chat box or just go around, Tracy, you have shared, you know, for you it's communication, but what have you overall kind of taken away from this evening? What have you noticed in terms of your awareness of your boundaries or boundaries in general?
It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It really is hard work. And depending on what area of your life, there are boundaries that are easier to set than others, but they feel a bit like a muscle to me. Like you need to keep flexing them and keep working on them because they are hard. And the work ones are bloody murder, really difficult. I can really resonate a lot with what Caroline was saying, that and the work ones are really, really hard.
And I love that analogy of it being like a muscle, because it absolutely is. Absolutely is. And just like the human body, we have got a gazillion muscles, said very unbiologically. But we've got lots of them and they all serve different functions, and that's just like boundaries. And sometimes when you've done a workout, you find a muscle that you didn't know about and it's really sore because it's been worked and you've never worked it before, much like boundaries. You just live and all of a sudden you've kind of worked a boundary that you didn't realise you needed to work. Clear communication, yeah. Always trying to avoid him as there's certain things he does. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes. Oh my word, that brings back memories. Yeah, and it is communication, and that's back to the different types of boundaries, like our material, like our time, like our emotional. It's kind of ticking lots of different boxes there. So yeah, clear communication and that willingness to stay in the tension, because so often we don't really assert our communication because it's uncomfortable. And when it's uncomfortable, then not only are we kind of staying not very happy with the results that we're experiencing, like, you know, our work situations and our living situations, but we're not offering the people that we live with and work with the opportunity to grow and learn that actually, see what you're doing, that's really frustrating. So it's a win-win. It's a tough, just like, you know, exercising and kind of building our muscles up. It can be tough to begin with. And then it gets a wee bit easier as we build up. And then when we let it go, it can be tough again. And then life happens and, you know, we break a leg or whatever, and it's back to it being tough. But we don't need to do particularly anything other than stay clear as to what we want to create. And it naturally comes into being as long as we're taking action, reflect, learn, take action, reflect, learn. Would anyone else like to share? Or shall we just wrap up? Dun, dun, dun. Well, thank you very much for coming along. Stay curious. What's working for you? And my invitation to you is to just spend a wee bit of time, you know, after this call, build the momentum, but, you know, what is it that you really want to be working on and playing with to help you create those boundaries that really support you? And just know you don't need to have all the answers. You Just take the action, learn from it, sit with the tension, and drink wine. Right.
Thanks, Colette. That was great. Thank you.
Cool.